I'm sure many of you will have enjoyed the irony that in many ways BIM is about technology. It's not all of it, but it's some of it. And I'm sure most of you will have enjoyed today watching us having to grapple with the technology to even do projectors and microphones. But that's the nature of these. So it gives me great pleasure to open the floor now for questions.
My question is to Dr. Bilal. He said the BIM can be implemented in universities. Can you give an example how we can, we can implement the BIM in the university systems? And another question, I'm from mechanical background, so the construction management is a bit far. But I mean, what is the difference between the BIM and ISO system, this ISO 9000 and this quality management stuff?
Okay, thank you for your question. Implementing BIM in learning, meaning if we first understand it's about learning, not just tertiary education, not just at university level. So when we say BIM learning, it needs to cover different sectors, of course, tertiary, vocational, I don't know what you call it here, CPT programs within associations, self-learning, etc. But I focus back on your question, because I mentioned all this because they're complementary. We cannot just address BIM education as if something that needs to happen only at university. How do you integrate BIM into universities? Now there's lots of research being done. Some universities have adopted certain approaches, others have chosen different routes. Now, if we again say, okay, are we looking at it from a bachelor level, like a BA, or looking at the master's level or research? At the research level, there's no problem. At the master's level, there's already a couple of master's degrees dedicated to the topic of using technology in design, construction, operation. So at the master's level, because you can separate it completely, there's no problem whatsoever. Okay, so we're not discussing masters or PhDs. The only issue we're still left with at the tertiary level is the bachelor degree. Now, the approach to including BIM at the bachelor level, there's different ways of doing it. Now, many institutions have separated BIM, said, okay, I'm going to give a few labs at the beginning for first-year students. Others said this is not enough, so they gave a course every year. Others said, no, we want to not have a BIM topic at all separate. We want to integrate it into different topics. Now, this is the what. Now, the how is different in organizations. The successes made so far, the ones I know of, is when, first, the university recognizes the need to integrate BIM into their curricula, which is a big thing. Once they recognize it, they have to take action. Now, how do they take action? I'm currently at the advisory board of RMIT University, and if you've heard about it, it's in Melbourne, so it's a huge university. So I'm part of the advisory coming from industry. So what they're doing is first trying to understand what industry wants. Well, okay? And then try to modify each and every course, each and every unit, so it's the BIM topics are integrated into these topics. So not trying to separate BIM into some kind of course, which is the wrong action actually, but to integrate in every course. So how do we change the language of each course so we respect 3D modeling, information, databases, processes, all these things? Of course, the discussion is much longer than that. Should I answer the second question? Or? Okay. Yes, you're doing that.
You want me? Okay. Before I answer a question, I want to divert to something else, if you don't mind. In Hong Kong, the government is strongly advertising and advocating the use of BIM for two reasons, okay? First, the use of BIM will almost eliminate corruption in Hong Kong. Because nowadays, even in Hong Kong, the construction industry is the most corrupt industry. Because it's so much fussy area. that you can add more money and all that. So by the use of BIM, the industry will become very transparent. That's the main reason for the government to strongly to promote the use of BIM. The second reason is that the use of BIM promote industrialization or modularization of the construction process. You use lots of modules for the construction process. In Hong Kong, there is a shortage of labor. Nobody, if you can find anything else, nobody would like to work on site. Because working on site is dangerous, is just dirty and all that. But if the process is actually changed to a factory-based, manufacturing, then actually they will solve that problem. And then in Hong Kong, the average work age is 50. They can't find young people to come into the industry. So using BIM will change that. Will make that a manufacturing process of, say, bathroom or kitchen in a factory, and the young people will come into this industry, and those people will find the proper wives and all that, because at the moment it's all become a social problem in Hong Kong. So this is the main reason for the government in Hong Kong to introduce the use of BIM. Whether this is true in, say, Malaysia or other country, I don't know. Okay, come back to the educational program. For a university to, open a new degree or open new courses, it has to meet certain criteria. At the moment, the use of BIM or the teacher of BIM hasn't got enough theoretical underpinning. Because what we do is to teach them how to use software to create models. It's not the theoretical underpinning is not sufficient for us to justify a new program. You can have trainings. You can add that into your teaching, add that into your quantity surveying, add that into your other units. But BIM is not yet a separate course in all the university I have seen so far. Well, maybe I got a wrong opinion, but anyway, this is my personal observation.
Oh, okay, I'd just like to develop that question a little bit further. Looking around the room, I can see there's many familiar faces in here who I know are very experts with BIM. But also quite a few people in this room are very new to BIM and are trying to understand what is BIM and how long does it take to get into it. So I'm going to set a theoretical position now and say to our panel, okay guys, if you took somebody who can say, let's say they can use AutoCAD up to a fairly reasonable level where they could do some very close detailing. Let's keep something simple for a house, for a nice bungalow house, to detail that very, very clearly. We're not going to worry about the rest of the team. We're going to keep it purely at an architectural level, so no MEP engineers, no structural engineers, and not trying to integrate with the rest of the team. So I'm going to ask the panel, how long would someone with a little bit of computer experience, how long would they need to learn something like Revit or Tekla so that or Bentley, so that they can get some skills in place and actually start to use the software? Maybe Enchik Harris, as someone who understands training, maybe you could answer that question first.
Say again, what's the question?
How long do you think somebody that's familiar with a computer would need before they can start to use Revit to quite a useful level?
Okay, thank you, Dr. John. It's based on the training I attended, Revit. The training took about 3 days. 3 days training. Yes, of course, after the 3 days, I can use the basic function. But that is my personal experience. But to enter into actual project, in construction project, this is the experience from PKNS. They told us that they took about 1 month to familiar with the software and start to draw the model in 3D by the non-experienced guy, non-computer literate guy. So it take 1 month to be able to draw. But that is from PKNS. Maybe this guy, he sit on the desk for the whole 1 month, training and exploring every day, so it take 1 month. But in normal circumstances, I get the feedback from the industry to familiarize with the whole process using Revit, or BIM process. They need at least 3 months to really get into BIM with Revit with software. And then the training that I attended for EcoSim also took me 3 days, but I'm not able to have any experience share with us on the EcoSim software. So I'm not sure how long it will take for EcoSim to be adopted by the users. The experience from Revit for normal users will take 1 to 3 months, I presume. And this also being agreed by the Gianluca, the Autodesk regional director or something. So he said, according to him, you will need a facilitator to make sure that you will, after the training of that 3 days training, a facilitator to sit with you and train you throughout the project, at least 1 project, and you can do it by your own in the next project. So that's how to adopt BIM in a construction project. So any additional?
Okay, thank you. If you look at it, there's three components to competency, okay, or competence. You have to look at the skill, you have to look at the construction knowledge, and you look at the experience, okay? BIM is not Revit, okay? You have to start with a solution similar to Revit or ArchiCAD or Tekla or any of these. You have to gain that skill. I've been a trainer, before going into research. And it's always been, the management wants to always reduce the time for training. So what was the minimum needed to train anyone? Because we can differentiate between the rookie, the new guy coming in, and the experienced guy and whatever. Okay, let's just forget about that. 20 hours. We were able to train a medium, let's say just an average person, to use the software. Is this enough for BIM? Not even close. You can use the software, but unless you have construction knowledge, there's no benefit. Okay? It doesn't mean you don't. Look, if you look at it, I would have shown you a chart, but the idea is, who is the best BIMmer? Person who is really good at BIM. It is the experienced guy who was patient enough, or she was patient enough to relinquish their old habits, learn new habits based on new technologies, and use their construction knowledge to generate new buildings. It's not the guy coming out of the university who just learned this new skill. Always remember, it's a combination of experience, skill, and knowledge, with skill being the smallest part of it. 20 hours, that's it, you need for the skill. Okay? But the rest could take a couple of years.
Professor, do you have any views on the kind of duration that should be allowed for either an individual or a company to start adopting both the technical competency with the software and the process knowledge that allows you to start applying this through a BIM project?
Well, as John said earlier, I have actually a company who which provides the BIM services. My personal experience is that if you take anyone who has the right background of industry and they're trying to use any of the software, it takes about from 1 week to a month. So it's the use of the software is not a dramatic, not a big deal in my view. And this is also I want to de-emphasize that if you maintain the BIM at this stage, I think the use of BIM or the BIM in our industry is become a manual work. It's just it doesn't need a lot of intelligence, just build models. And again, this is why the university are very reluctant to take BIM in as a profession. And also the industry and have to think twice when you rush into a new tool like this, and then before you're realizing then if every designer is going to use the 3D model system to design, and then the whole building information modeling service will disappear tomorrow. So again, we have to not really just to think how to learn quickly on the use of the software. That's not the purpose. It's about how this introducing something new into our project delivery process, and what can be taken out, what can be replaced. And so far, I haven't seen that clearly, that replacement, and this is my worry.
Just to add from the experience of the industry, some of the industry players saying that to understand really understand what is BIM, you need to complete the whole project. At least for architect, you need to go through the whole process of submission from beginning until he managed to submit the plan using BIM process. Then after that, they will understand. And for project team, they need to complete the whole process, then they will understand what is BIM in their next project. That is the feedback that I get from the industry.
I'd just like to add from my own experience, the 1 to 3 month to become competent with the software is very true. I'd also like to add that the software changes regularly. So I found from my experience, I learned BIM learned software some time back. And then if you don't use it regularly, you tend to forget it. Then you come back after a period of 6 months onto a fresh project, start to use the software again, and it's gone through various changes and iterations, and quite often it feels like you're going back to square one and you have to refresh yourself. So you need to work regularly at some of the skills there just on the software side alone. I know later on today Nick is going to talk extensively about the processes, so I'm going to delay that until this afternoon's session when we speak about that. Okay, do we have any more questions from the floor?
Good afternoon. My name is Azlan Zainal from Strand Aerospace, Malaysia. I've got 2 questions. The first one is for Dr. Bilal. Could you share your experience worldwide on the BIM implementation and how each continent apply this knowledge and technology to suit their sort of human capital? Now, obviously you are addressing one of the Asian country, which is Malaysia, and normally Asian countries and their people have their own ways to implement certain things. People might disagree with me, but we know from experience, I believe that we like, if new things been introduced, we like to just go 100 miles an hour and do the analytical process and thinking later, and that will cause a problem. Because I think Malaysia is still at infancy level in terms of BIM implementation. So I think if you could advise us on your experience worldwide. Second question to the professor is that from the academic point of view, have you done in Hong Kong itself, have you done a reverse process where you go to Hong Kong and understand industrial problem in construction and work backwards and look at how BIM can resolve these industrial problems in terms of research, so that research could be fed back to the industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's an excellent question, actually, and quite difficult to answer sufficiently. Cultures differ, okay? The way you implement change differs. The way you implement innovation differs. But what's interesting about BIM is the topics don't change. The way you implement them change from culture to culture, from organizational culture to organizational culture, not just from country to country, okay? But the what is the same. What needs to be done? We need to buy software. We need to train. We need to develop protocols. We need management buy-in and championship, encouraging people to move forward. They need incentives. You need communication. They're all exactly the same wherever you go, okay? Even if you change BIM to put completely different kind of information-based innovation, these are the same. There's no difference. So don't. I'm just going to read through your question rather than answer your question. I don't think there is something that you need to do differently. On what sense? Meaning, what you need to do, but you have to do it at your own pace. Rather than some, as we said in one of the slides, some cultures can enforce. You have to do this. Like, let's say some organizations you work with have very top-down culture. The manager would call the team managers in and say, hey guys, I was at a conference and heard about BIM, and I want the company to produce BIM in 72 hours. Doesn't work like that. But there's certain cultures that say, no, I want you to, this is what we want, develop the mechanisms. Each company is different. Each company needs to do it their own way. There is no good or bad or better way. But there are certain outcomes that need to be targeted, certain requirements that need to be fulfilled, and certain deliverables to be targeted. Okay? The rest is up to you. The differences are not as great as you think.
Well, you raised a very interesting question, and let me share you some of our data we've been, collecting. We started collecting data about 5 years ago, and because it's about the length of BIM used in Hong Kong in the public sector. Well, I just show you the conclusions. Okay. The conclusions are in two aspects. The first aspect is if the BIM is used in a traditional contract project, that means the contractor, they just take this money, and then whether they use BIM or not actually has nothing to do with the owner. Okay, because win or lose, the contract will only take the whole responsibility. And in that kind of projects, and obviously the use of BIM will lower down the risk of contractors. But it's very silly for the public client to offer money to help the contractor to implement BIM, because the public client benefited nothing from the process. Okay, so that's not recommended. So from 3 years ago, we wrote recommendation to the government. We say, if you want to introduce BIM, then you have to change your contractual relationship from, me and you take all the responsibility, I give you money, to kind of partnership. That means you have to share the profit. Remember the chart I show you, say there might be 15% all savings that we talk about, right? So if the public client want to offer more money to do the BIM, then the public client, of course, should have the right to share the savings with the contractor. So by doing, when you say share the cost and share the risk, is very easy to say, but very difficult to do it. Then what we did afterwards is that we tell them that the the BIM team or consortium, that's what the Hong Kong term, has to be formed by representative from different stakeholders. That means there will be a BIM representative from the client, a BIM representative from others, a designer and contractor. We have this team to use the model to do some experiment, to try to find the risks of construction, to reduce risks, and also to make joint decisions. And consequently, the saving should be split among all. And in those projects, I'll tell you, yes, they are savings, depending on what you talk to. The public sector say will be 20%, but I tell you, to be true, you will greatly reduce that amount of rework, and that's the purpose. And we're talking about the 10 to 15%. And so far, I can confidently tell you that's the only scenario that works so far. And if you want to just to embed the tool or the BIM into the existing process, then depending on who you're talking to, if you talk to the contractor, yes, there's benefit. If you talk to the client, no, nothing. So depending on what you talk about it. Anyone want to add it?
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from the floor?
I'm Ashraf, Ashraf bin Ahmad Jamal from Ministry of Health. I have two questions. The first question is for, I think Mr. Bilal can answer it. The first question is, how does BIM technology translate from the theoretical construction models to the real world of operation and maintenance of buildings? So how does the BIM integrate the system of it in terms of operation and maintenance? And how can it integrate with the building systems such as building automation system or building management system? What is the benefit and what can we reap off from it? And the second question is for Mr. Harris from CIDB. Is there any successful project in Malaysia that use BIM in the operation and maintenance? Because I think this most beneficial for facility manager, FM. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. It's good to look at BIM from the operational side, because it's usually not on people's minds. They focus mostly on design and, of course, on construction. But most benefits from BIM really go to the owner. And this is evidence in the US more than any other country, where the drive for BIM is by the owners and then the contractors. I've worked on very complex projects. One of the most complex projects I worked on is a very famous opera house in a city, not Melbourne, in Australia. Sydney Opera House. Very complex building. One of the pioneers of using 3D technology and BIM later to generate that building using BIM tools and, of course, embedding the right information in. Once you have that model, which is very rich in information, and it is object-based, you have all the objects. So you have a mechanical unit, you have a door, you have a system. You can link it to other databases. So you can link it through something called a middleware. I don't want to go too technical here. So BIM is a self-contained database if you want. You have other systems like building management systems for lighting, for air control, for the performance of the building, which is also a self-contained system. There is ways to link these two using something called middleware, something that sits in between BIM and these other systems, so you can benefit from the model to control lighting, to turn things on and off, etc., etc. And there is tons and tons of possibilities once you have the model, which is very rich, and once you do have that system, in order to link it. For space management, you name it. Tons of possibilities. So really, when you're doing BIM, you're not really doing the linkage, you're doing the building and making it rich. And there are tons of other systems out there, and then you link them together. You don't use BIM to do all this. you use BIM as a foundation to link it to other systems.